The scent of aged paper and polished wood was Alara Vance's truest perfume. It clung to her soft cardigans and settled in the gentle waves of her auburn hair, a comforting aroma that spoke of forgotten stories and cherished memories. Her shop, Echoes and Curios, was nestled like a warm secret on a cobbled side street in Oakhaven, a coastal town where the sea breeze carried the tang of salt and the distant cry of gulls. Alara had built the shop not just with shelves and display cases, but with patience and a profound reverence for the past. Every item, from the chipped porcelain teacups to the grand claw-footed armwares, had a story, and Alara, with her quiet sensitivity, often felt she could hear the faintest echoes of them. She wasn't a medium, not in any dramatic sense, but a whisperer of sorts, attuned to the resonance of objects that had lived many lives before coming into her care. Most mornings began the same way. A delicate floral teacup filled with Earl Grey, a fresh scone from Mrs. Gable's bakery down the lane, and the soothing ritual of dusting. Sunlight, filtered through the leaded glass of her shop window, painted shifting patterns across the worn Persian rugs and gleamed off polished silver. Today, however, there was a different energy humming in the air, a subtle tremor that Alara felt deep in her bones, like the first stirrings of a new season. A delivery was expected, a rather large consignment from Blackwood Manor, an old estate on the edge of town that had stood empty and brooding for decades. It had finally been sold, its contents destined for auction, or, in some cases, for Alara's discerning eye. Blackwood Manor was a local legend, a place whispered about in hushed tones, rumored to hold secrets and perhaps a touch of melancholy magic. It was precisely the kind of place whose discarded treasures Alara yearned to discover. She hummed a soft, wordless tune as she rearranged a collection of antique pocket watches, their silent faces telling time only in the glint of their brass casings. Her fingers, long and slender, traced the intricate engravings, imagining the hands that had once held them, the moments they had measured. Alara found solace in these connections to the past, a sense of belonging that sometimes felt elusive in her own quiet present. She was content, yes, deeply so, with her shop and her routines, but there was a corner of her heart that held a silent longing, a space reserved for a story yet unwritten. The chime above the shop door, a cluster of delicate brass bells, jingled, announcing a visitor. Alara looked up, a soft smile ready on her lips, but it was just Mrs. Gable, popping her head in. "Alara, dear, your delivery's here. That big truck just pulled up to the curb." Mrs. Gable's voice was as warm and doughy as her fresh-baked bread. "Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Martha." Alara's heart quickened with a familiar thrill of anticipation. Each new arrival was like opening a forgotten book, a chance to delve into an unknown narrative. She hurried to the front, pushing open the heavy oak door. A large moving truck, emblazoned with Oakhaven removals, was indeed parked outside, its hydraulic lift descending with a groan, laden with boxes and wrapped furniture. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a slightly weary but kind face was directing two younger movers. He turned as Alara approached, his eyes, the color of a stormy sea, meeting hers. "Miss Vance? Elias Thorne. I'm handling estate clearance for Blackwood Manor." His voice was deep, a low rumble that resonated pleasantly. He extended a hand, and Alara found hers enveloped in a firm, warm grasp. His palm was rough, calloused, speaking of practical work, yet his touch was surprisingly gentle. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Thorne. I'm Alara Vance. I've been looking forward to seeing what treasures the manor holds." She found herself lingering on his gaze a moment longer than necessary, drawn in by the intensity of his eyes, which seemed to hold a quiet understanding. There was a faint scent of pine and something else, something clean, earthy about him. He offered a small, polite smile. "Treasures, certainly. There's a lifetime of them. My grandmother, Eleanor Thorne, was quite the collector. Though, I suspect you'll find much of it personal." His gaze softened, a hint of something wistful in his expression. "She didn't part with much." "I understand," Alara said softly, her heart immediately reaching out to the unspoken grief in his voice. "The most cherished items often carry the deepest stories." Elias nodded, then turned to direct the movers. "Careful with that cabinet, lads. It's an old one." For the next hour, Alara worked alongside the movers and Elias, guiding them through the narrow aisles of her shop, indicating where each piece of furniture might best fit. The items from Blackwood Manor were indeed different. There were fewer grand showy pieces and more intimate ones. A delicate writing desk with faded inlay, a collection of old leather-bound books, a worn tapestry, a series of intricately carved wooden boxes. Each piece seemed to carry a subtle weight, a quiet energy that Ilara felt distinctly. Elias was efficient and observant, his presence a calm, steady anchor amidst the organized chaos. He would occasionally glance at Ilara, watching her delicate hands as she unwrapped a porcelain figurine or carefully placed a small silver locket into a display case. He seemed to appreciate her reverence for the objects, the way she handled them as if they were living things. As the last large item was brought in, Elias approached Ilara, wiping a smudge of dust from his cheek. "That's everything that was designated for your shop, Miss Vance. There are a few boxes of smaller, more personal effects that were packed separately. My grandmother was meticulous about her belongings. I'll need to go through those myself, but I thought you might want to see them, just in case there's anything you'd like to consign." Ilara's eyes lit up. "Oh, yes, please. Those are often the most fascinating. The true whispers come from the personal items." Elias tilted his head slightly, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "Whispers?" Ilara felt a blush creep up her neck. She rarely spoke of her peculiar sensitivity. "It's just a feeling. Like the objects have stories they want to tell. The more personal they are, the clearer the whispers." She gave a self-deprecating shrug. "Perhaps it's just my imagination." Elias didn't laugh or dismiss her. Instead, he studied her for a moment, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I don't think so. My grandmother, she believed in the power of memory, of things holding a piece of the past. Perhaps you're more attuned to it than most." His words were gentle, understanding, and Ilara felt a surprising warmth spread through her chest. "I have a few more boxes in the truck," he continued, gesturing. "I'll bring them in now if that's all right." "Of course," Ilara replied, her voice a little softer than before. He returned shortly, carrying 3 sturdy cardboard boxes carefully sealed. He placed them on her large oak worktable in the back of the shop, a space usually reserved for restoration and contemplation. "I'll leave you to it then," Elias said, a faint smile touching his lips. "I have to head back to the manor to oversee the final clear-out. Thank you, Ilara, for taking such good care of her things." He used her first name unthinkingly, and the familiarity felt natural, not presumptuous. "Thank you, Elias," she responded, her gaze meeting his, a shared moment of understanding passing between them. "It's truly an honor." With a final nod, he turned and left, the brass bells chiming a farewell. Ilara stood for a moment, the quiet returning to the shop, but it was a different kind of quiet now, filled with the presence of new stories and the lingering scent of pine and earth. She approached the boxes on the worktable, a sense of reverence settling over her. These were the true heart of Blackwood Manor, the intimate remnants of a life lived. She carefully cut the tape on the first box, revealing layers of tissue paper. Inside, she found a collection of old photographs, their edges softened with time, depicting a younger Eleanor Thorne, a vibrant woman with kind eyes and a strong jawline, often alongside a handsome, smiling man. Ilara felt a pang of tenderness. A love story, perhaps, captured in faded sepia tones. The second box held delicate lace handkerchiefs, a collection of intricately embroidered thimbles, and a small, tarnished silver locket. Ilara picked up the locket, her fingers tracing the faded floral design. It felt warm, almost humming with a low vibration. She pressed the clasp, and it sprung open to reveal 2 tiny oval photographs. A younger Eleanor Thorne and the same handsome man from the photographs, both smiling brightly. On the reverse, faintly engraved, were the initials ETHOWM and a date, 1942. Ilara carefully placed the locket aside, her imagination already weaving tales of wartime farewells and hopeful reunions. But it was the third box that truly captured her attention. It was smaller, heavier, and tucked beneath a layer of old silk scarves. As she lifted the last scarf, she gasped softly. It was a small wooden box, carved from dark, polished mahogany, its surface smooth and cool beneath her fingertips. There were no ornate decorations, only a simple, elegant clasp. It felt ancient, imbued with a profound sense of purpose. This was it, she knew instantly. This was where the whispers would be clearest. With trembling fingers, Ilara unlatched the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a single, leather-bound journal. Its cover was worn smooth from handling, the pages slightly warped, and the leather itself seemed to exhale a sigh of forgotten secrets. Next to it, tied with a delicate silk ribbon, was a stack of letters, their envelopes addressed in elegant, looping script. Elara picked up the journal first. It was surprisingly heavy, filled with tight, meticulous handwriting. She opened it to a random page, her eyes scanning the elegant script. It was dated many decades ago, and the words spoke of longing, of gardens, of a William, and a hidden heart. She closed the journal gently, her heart thrumming. This wasn't just a collection of memories. It was a deeply personal chronicle, a window into a soul. And the letters, tied with that fragile ribbon, promised more. A quiet excitement bloomed in her chest, a feeling more potent than any she had experienced in a long time. These weren't just items to be sold. They were fragments of a life, a love, a story waiting to be rediscovered. And somehow, Elias Thorne, with his quiet strength and understanding eyes, was intrinsically linked to it. Elara looked from the journal and letters to the now empty space where Elias had stood. A new story had just walked into her quiet world, carried on the gentle whispers of the past. She felt a profound sense of anticipation, a stirring of her own heart, that had nothing to do with antique sales, and everything to do with the unexpected paths life sometimes chose to reveal. The silence of the shop was now charged with possibility, and Elara, with a soft smile, knew her quiet days were about to become wonderfully complicated. The silence of the shop was now charged with possibility, and Elara, with a soft smile, knew her quiet days were about to become wonderfully complicated. She watched the last sliver of Elias's silver car disappear down the lane, a strange lightness settling in her chest. The air in the shop, usually a comforting blanket of dust and old wood, now seemed to shimmer with something new. She moved slowly, almost reverently to the counter, her fingers tracing the faint ring where his teacup had rested. The empty space where the boxes of letters and the small personal artifacts had been was a stark reminder of his presence, yet the impression he'd left behind felt anything but empty. Elara found herself replaying their conversation, not just the words, but the way his eyes had crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the low timbre of his voice as he spoke of his grandmother, the surprising gentleness in his large hands as he'd handled the delicate antique watch. He was a man of contrasts, she thought, a blend of strength and sensitivity, of scholarly curiosity, and an easy, disarming charm. She picked up the worn, leather-bound journal head left behind, the one Elias had used to jot down notes about the collection. It lay open to a page filled with elegant, sloping script, his own. It wasn't meant for her, yet she felt a pull to read it, a quiet intimacy in holding something so personal. She resisted, closing the book gently and placing it on a high shelf, a silent promise to herself to return it to him when he came back. When he came back, not woof. The certainty of it surprised her. The afternoon passed in a haze of gentle daydreams. She dusted shelves with more care than usual, straightened stacks of old prints, and rearranged a display of porcelain figurines, but her mind kept drifting. She kept glancing at the shop door, half expecting him to reappear, perhaps having forgotten something, or simply to return, drawn back by the quiet magic of the place, or perhaps by her. It was a silly thought, she chided herself. Yet the smile never quite left her lips. Later, as dusk painted the shop in hues of amber and rose, Elara made herself a fresh cup of jasmine tea. She sat in her favorite armchair, nestled amongst towering bookshelves, and finally allowed herself to revisit the letter Elias had given her. The paper was thick, slightly aged, and bore the faint scent of lavender. The handwriting was elegant, flowing, and distinctly feminine. "My dearest Elara," it began, and her heart did a tiny flutter. "I know not when this letter will find you, or if it ever will. But if you are reading this, then perhaps, just perhaps, the universe has conspired to bring together two souls who appreciate the gentle whispers of the past." Elara paused, a warmth spreading through her. Tu, solsing dat. It was a beautiful, tender sentiment, and for a moment, she imagined Elias's grandmother writing it, her hand guided by a hope that transcended time. The letter spoke of the collection, of its history, of the love woven into each piece, but it also spoke of Elara herself, a woman the grandmother had never met, yet somehow seemed to know. It was a testament to her quiet passion, her dedication to preserving stories. It ended with a plea, not for the collection's safekeeping, but for Alara to open her own heart to the possibilities that lay beyond the familiar, to embrace the unexpected. When she finally folded the letter and tucked it back into its envelope, Alara felt a profound sense of connection, not just to Elias's grandmother, but to Elias himself. He was the messenger, the one who had brought this unexpected warmth into her life. Her quiet days, she knew, were indeed about to become wonderfully complicated, and she found herself eagerly anticipating the unfolding chapters. 2 days later, the phone rang. Alara was perched precariously on a rolling ladder, trying to reach a dusty volume on a high shelf. She nearly tumbled off in her haste to answer, a ridiculous surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Alara, it's Elias Thorne," the familiar voice said, a low rumble that sent a pleasant shiver down her spine. "I hope I'm not calling at an inconvenient time." "Elias, not at all," she managed, trying to sound composed despite her thrumming pulse. "Just wrestling with some particularly stubborn dust bunnies." He chuckled, a warm, genuine sound. "A noble pursuit, I'm sure. I was calling about the remaining items from the collection, and perhaps a coffee. Or lunch, if you're amenable." "Oh," Alara said, trying to quell the sudden rush of excitement. "Yes, of course. The collection." She paused, then added, "Lunch sounds lovely." "Wonderful," he replied, his voice laced with an undeniable pleasure. "How about that charming little bistro down the street from you? The one with the striped awning?" "The willow tree," she confirmed, a smile blooming on her face. "Perfect. Tomorrow, say, 1 o'clock?" 1 o'clock it is. I look forward to it, Alara." "Me too, Elias," she whispered, long after he had hung up. She carefully descended the ladder, feeling lighter than air. The dust bunnies could wait. She had a date. Or, at least, a business lunch that felt an awful lot like one. The next day, Alara chose a simple, elegant dress in a soft forest green, a color that brought out the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. She wore her grandmother's delicate silver locket, a quiet charm against her skin. She arrived at the willow tree a few minutes early, her heart doing a playful jig in her chest. Elias was already there, seated at a table by the window, bathed in the soft afternoon light. He stood as she approached, his tall frame unfolding gracefully. He was wearing a casual linen shirt that highlighted the breadth of his shoulders, and a smile that seemed to reach his eyes, warming them to a deep, inviting hazel. "Alara, you look lovely," he said, his gaze lingering for a moment, making her cheeks flush. "Thank you, Elias. You too," she replied, feeling a pleasant flutter. They settled into their seats, and the conversation flowed easily, effortlessly, like a long-lost melody. They discussed the remaining items in the collection, the historical significance of some of the pieces, Elias's ongoing research into his family history. But soon, the discussion veered into more personal territory. "My grandmother, Clara, she was a remarkable woman," Elias explained, stirring his coffee. "She had this incredible knack for finding beauty in the forgotten, for seeing the stories etched into everyday objects. That's what drew her to these things, not their monetary value, but the lives they represented." "I understand that completely," Alara said softly, a kinship forming between them. "That's why I do what I do. Every scratch, every worn edge, it's a testament to a life lived, a moment preserved. It's like being a custodian of memories." "Exactly," he said, his eyes lighting up. "Most people just see old junk. You see the soul of the object." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. "It's rare to find someone who understands that, someone who feels it." Alara felt a deep warmth spread through her. She rarely articulated her passion with such fervor, fearing it might sound whimsical to others. But Elias truly seemed to get it. "My grandmother, she taught me that," Alara shared, a fond memory surfacing. "She used to say that every antique had a heartbeat, if you just listened closely enough." They talked about their grandmothers for a while, a shared thread connecting them. Elias spoke of Clara's adventurous spirit, her love for travel, and her surprising sense of humor. Alara recounted tales of her own grandmother, a quiet, wise woman who had instilled in her a deep appreciation for history and the beauty of handcrafted things. It felt incredibly intimate, sharing these foundational figures in their lives. The food arrived, and they ate slowly, savoring the delicious flavors while their conversation continued to weave between antiques and personal anecdotes. Elias told her about his work as a historical consultant, traveling to different estates and helping families preserve their legacies. Elara spoke of the satisfaction she found in matching forgotten treasures with new owners who would cherish them, giving them a second life. "You know," Elias said, putting down his fork, "when I first walked into your shop, it felt like stepping into a storybook. All those unique pieces, each with its own secret. And then I saw you, surrounded by them, and I thought, ah, the keeper of the tales." Elara laughed, a genuine, joyful sound. "Is that what you thought? I hope I didn't seem too much like a dusty old librarian." "Never," he said, his gaze warm and steady. "You seemed enchanting, and utterly at home." Her cheeks flushed again, a pleasant heat spreading through her. She found herself captivated by his easy charm, his genuine interest, the way he made her feel seen, truly seen, in a way few others ever had. "So," Elias said, a thoughtful expression on his face, about the remaining items. "There are a few pieces that are particularly delicate, and I'd prefer to retrieve them personally. Would you mind if I came by the shop again, perhaps later this week?" "Of course not," Elara replied, her heart lifting. "Anytime. The shop is open, and I'm always there." "Perfect. Perhaps Friday afternoon? And maybe, if you're not too tired of my company, we could grab dinner afterward? A proper dinner, not a business lunch masquerading as one," he added with a playful grin. Elara's smile widened. "I'd like that very much, Elias." As they parted ways outside the bistro, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the willow tree, Elara felt a profound sense of happiness. Her quiet world was indeed becoming wonderfully complicated, and she wouldn't have it any other way. Friday arrived, bringing with it a crisp autumn chill and a sky painted in shades of soft gray. Elara found herself humming as she arranged a fresh bouquet of asters and chrysanthemums on the counter, the shop smelling faintly of wood polish and blooming flowers. She kept glancing at the clock, a giddy anticipation bubbling within her. Elias arrived precisely at 3, carrying a sturdy, padded case for the more fragile items. He was dressed a little more casually today, in a soft wool sweater, the color of rich earth, which made him seem even more approachable, more real. "Afternoon, Elara," he greeted, his smile warm, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "The shop smells wonderful today." "Just trying to out-perfume the dust," she quipped, feeling instantly at ease in his presence. They spent the next hour or so carefully going through the remaining items from his grandmother's collection. There was a delicate porcelain music box, its painted flowers faded but still beautiful, that played a faint, sweet melody when wound. There was a collection of silver thimbles, each intricately engraved, clearly belonging to a dedicated seamstress. And finally, a small leather-bound diary, its pages filled with elegant looping script, a continuation of the story Elias had begun to uncover. As Elias carefully packed the music box, his brow furrowed in concentration, Elara watched him. There was a quiet intensity about him when he handled these precious objects, a reverence that mirrored her own. "Your grandmother must have had such a rich life," she observed softly. He looked up, meeting her gaze. "She did, and I'm only just beginning to truly understand it. These objects, these letters, they're like fragments of a puzzle, and I'm trying to put her story back together." He paused, then added, "It makes me wonder about the stories we leave behind." "Indeed," Elara mused, picking up a stray silver thimble. "Sometimes, it's the smallest things that tell the biggest tales." She ran her thumb over the smooth metal. "Like this. Imagine all the garments it helped create, all the lives it touched." Elias nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You have a gift, Elara, not just for finding these treasures, but for understanding them, for connecting with the past." A comfortable silence settled between them as he finished packing. It wasn't an awkward silence, but one filled with unspoken understanding, a shared appreciation for the quiet magic of the moment. "Well," Elias finally said, closing the case with a gentle click, "that's the last of the collection for now. Unless, of course, you unearth any more hidden gems." He winked, and Elara felt a familiar flutter in her chest. "You never know," she replied, her smile bright. "This old place still has its secrets." "I'm sure it does," he agreed, picking up the case. "And I have a feeling I'll be back to hear about them." He gestured towards the door. "Shall we? I made a reservation at that new Italian place, La Luna. I hear their pasta is divine. Sounds perfect, Elara said, her heart singing. She grabbed her coat and locked the shop door behind them, the familiar click sounding less like an ending and more like a beginning. Dinner at La Luna was everything she hoped for, and more. The restaurant was cozy, dimly lit, with the scent of garlic and herbs perfuming the air. Elias was a captivating conversationalist, effortlessly weaving between light-hearted anecdotes and deeper reflections. He spoke of his childhood, growing up in a house filled with books and antique maps, his parents fostering his curiosity. He confessed a secret passion for old detective novels, and an inexplicable fondness for terribly bad puns. Elara found herself laughing more freely than she had in years. In turn, she shared more about her own life, her solitary but fulfilling existence tending to the shop, her love for quiet evenings with a good book and a cup of tea. She spoke of her parents, both academics, who had encouraged her independent spirit, and her decision to forgo a more conventional career path to follow her passion for history and storytelling. You're a fiercely independent woman, Elara, Elias observed, his eyes twinkling across the flickering candlelight. I admire that. It comes with the territory of living amongst ghosts and forgotten stories, she teased. They're very undemanding company. Perhaps, he conceded, a thoughtful smile playing on his lips. But I suspect you're capable of demanding company too, should the right person come along. His gaze held hers, and for a moment, the air crackled with an unspoken tension, a silent acknowledgement of the growing connection between them. Elara felt a warmth spread through her, a blush rising to her cheeks. She looked down at her plate, a little flustered, but also undeniably thrilled. After dinner, Elias walked her back to her apartment, which was located above the shop. The streetlights cast long shadows, and the air was crisp and cool. The silence between them was comfortable, companionable. Thank you for a wonderful evening, Elias, Elara said, stopping at her door. I truly enjoyed myself. The pleasure was all mine, Elara, he replied, his voice soft in the quiet night. He hesitated for a moment, then reached out, his hand gently touching her arm. His touch sent a spark through her, a gentle jolt that made her breath catch. I'd like to see you again, very soon. I'd like that too, she whispered, looking up at him. His eyes were warm, filled with a gentle kindness that made her heart ache in the most wonderful way. He leaned in slightly, and for a fleeting moment, Elara thought he might kiss her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild drumbeat in the stillness. But he simply smiled, a soft, lingering smile, and then pulled back. Good night, Elara, he said, his voice a low murmur. Good night, Elias, she replied, a little breathless. She watched him walk away, his silhouette disappearing into the shadows, before finally turning and letting herself into her apartment. The quiet space felt different now, infused with the echoes of his laughter, the warmth of his presence. She leaned against the closed door, her hand pressed to her chest, where her heart continued its joyful rhythm. Elara knew with a certainty that settled deep in her soul that this was more than just a passing acquaintance, more than a business transaction. Elias Thorne was a man who saw the stories in things, and he was beginning to see the story in her. And she, in turn, was discovering a story within herself that she hadn't known was waiting to be told. The anticipation that had stirred within her days ago had blossomed into something beautiful and profound, a delicate flower unfurling its petals under the gentle light of a new, unexpected love. Her quiet days were indeed wonderfully complicated, and she was ready for every single surprising twist and turn they would bring. Her quiet days were indeed wonderfully complicated, and she was ready for every single surprising twist and turn they would bring. The very next morning, a soft knock echoed through her small, sun-drenched cottage. She found him on her porch, not with flowers, but with a small, intricately carved wooden bird, its wings spread as if in mid-flight. I found it at the market this morning, he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. It felt like it had a story to tell, and I thought, perhaps it would like to tell it to you. A warmth spread through her chest, sweeter than any bouquet. It's beautiful, she whispered, tracing the smooth grain of the wood. Thank you. She invited him in, and they sat by the window, the morning light painting stripes across the worn rug. He told her about the old woman who sold him the bird, a woman with gnarled hands and eyes that held the wisdom of decades, who had carved it herself as a child. He spoke of the bird's imagined journey, flying through sun-dappled forests, resting on ancient oak branches, witnessing the quiet unfolding of seasons. She listened, captivated, feeling the gentle rhythm of his voice wash over her like a comforting tide. That day flowed into a week, and a week into a month, each day unspooling like a perfectly spun thread in a tapestry. Their connection deepened with an ease that surprised her, a natural fit she hadn't known she was missing. They found joy in the small, everyday rituals. He would often appear with a thermos of spiced tea on a crisp afternoon, finding her lost in thought, perhaps sketching in her garden or arranging a new collection of sea glass on her windowsill. She, in turn, began leaving him small notes, a pressed flower tucked into a book she knew he was reading, a freshly baked scone left on his doorstep, still warm from the oven. Their conversations stretched late into the evenings, sometimes over simple meals she prepared, sometimes by the crackling fire in his cozy, book-filled study. He spoke of his travels, of the forgotten towns he'd visited, the untold stories he'd unearthed from dusty archives, and the hushed whispers of elders. He had a way of bringing history to life, making her feel as though she was walking alongside him through ancient marketplaces and sun-drenched fields. She, in turn, began to open up about her own quiet passions, her love for the intricate patterns of nature, the way light fell on certain objects, the solace she found in the solitude of creation. She showed him her sketchbooks, filled with delicate drawings of wildflowers and forgotten architectural details, and he looked at them not just with admiration, but with a profound understanding, as if he could see the very essence of her soul laid bare on the page. One evening, as twilight softened the edges of the world, they were sitting on her porch swing, a shared blanket draped over their laps. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves in the old oak tree, and the scent of honeysuckle drifted in the air. He turned to her, his voice a low murmur. "You know," he began, "I've always been drawn to things that carry a history, that have been touched by many hands, seen many lives. It feels like a privilege to listen to their echoes." She nodded, her gaze fixed on the distant hills. "I understand that. For me, it's not just the history, but the quiet beauty of something overlooked. A chipped teacup, a faded photograph. They hold a kind of resilience, don't they? A testament to enduring time." She paused, then took a breath. "I used to think that was all I needed, these quiet observations. That my own story was meant to be a quiet one too, unfolding silently, without much fanfare." She felt a blush creep up her neck, a rare moment of vulnerability. "I suppose I was a little afraid of anything louder." He reached for her hand, his fingers warm around hers. "There's nothing wrong with a quiet story," he said softly. "But sometimes, even the most serene landscape can hold a powerful storm, or a vibrant bloom you never expected. And a quiet story can still have chapters filled with joy, with connection, with a love that sings." His thumb gently stroked the back of her hand, and the simple gesture sent a shiver of warmth through her. "I think your story is just beginning to find its voice, and it's a beautiful one." His words settled deep within her, a balm to long-held fears she hadn't even fully acknowledged. She realized then that his presence wasn't just adding to her life, it was enriching it, encouraging parts of her to unfurl that she hadn't known existed. He wasn't demanding she change, but simply offering her the space and the light to grow. One particularly blustery afternoon, a sudden fierce storm swept through the valley. The lights flickered and died, plunging her cottage into a cozy darkness. She lit candles, their gentle glow dancing across the walls, and huddled by the window, watching the rain lash against the panes. A few minutes later, she heard his familiar knock, muffled by the wind. He stood there, dripping wet, holding a small bag. "Thought you might be out of power," he said, a sheepish grin on his face. "Brought some emergency supplies." Inside the bag were 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate, a bar of dark chocolate, and a small leather-bound book of ghost stories. They spent the evening by the candlelight, sharing the hot chocolate and taking turns reading the eerie tales aloud, their voices hushed against the backdrop of the storm. Each time the wind howled or a branch scraped against the roof, they would exchange a conspiratorial glance, a shared laugh. In that simple, unplanned moment, surrounded by the storm's embrace and the soft glow of the candles, she felt an unparalleled sense of belonging. It was more than just comfort. It was a profound peace that settled over her, a feeling of being utterly seen and cherished. As the weeks continued to weave their gentle magic, a subtle tension began to surface, not between them, but within her. She adored their quiet life, the easy rhythm they'd found, but she also felt a pull towards something more, something undefined yet insistent. One afternoon, he mentioned an upcoming project that would take him a few towns over for a week. He needed to research the history of an old mill, a particularly rich vein of local lore. "I'll miss our evenings," he said, his gaze lingering on her. "But I'll call whenever I can." A pang shot through her, a surprising wave of longing even before he'd left. She realized how deeply intertwined their days had become, how much she relied on the quiet comfort of his presence. That week felt longer than any she had experienced in years. Her cottage, usually a sanctuary of peaceful solitude, now felt a little too quiet, a little too empty. She found herself glancing at her phone more often than usual, a knot of anticipation tightening in her stomach with each passing hour. When his calls finally came, his voice was a warm balm, and she found herself recounting every small detail of her day, eager to share the quiet moments that defined her life, knowing he would listen with genuine interest. One evening, during one of their calls, he described a particularly beautiful sunset he'd witnessed over the old mill pond, the sky ablaze with hues of orange and purple, reflecting in the still water. "It made me think of you," he said, "of the way you see beauty in everything, even the forgotten corners of the world." His words, simple and heartfelt, brought tears to her eyes. She missed him fiercely, and that missing wasn't a burden, but a clear affirmation of the depth of her feelings. It wasn't that she couldn't be alone, it was that she no longer wanted to be alone without him. When he finally returned, the relief that washed over her was palpable. She met him at his doorstep, and without a word, they simply held each other, a silent acknowledgement of the week apart and the joy of being reunited. The embrace was long and tender, a quiet conversation of hearts. When they finally pulled apart, his eyes held hers, a profound understanding shining within them. "It was a good trip," he said, "but I thought of you every day, and I realized my stories feel a little incomplete without you to share them with." She smiled, a radiant, genuine smile that lit up her entire face. "And my quiet days were far too quiet without you in them." She reached up, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I think I've learned that even the most beautiful solitude can be made infinitely richer by a shared presence." That evening, they sat by the fire, talking for hours, recounting their week, sharing snippets of their separate lives, weaving them back into a single narrative. He told her about the mill's forgotten history, about the families who had worked there for generations, their lives intertwined with the rhythmic creak of the water wheel. She told him about a rare bird she'd spotted in her garden, and the way the morning light had transformed a simple dewdrop into a glittering jewel. They listened to each other with an attentiveness that spoke volumes, savoring the sound of each other's voices, the comfort of their shared space. As the weeks turned into months, their love deepened, growing not with dramatic pronouncements, but with the steady, unwavering warmth of a hearth fire. They began to speak of their future, not in grand, sweeping plans, but in gentle suggestions and shared dreams. "Maybe we could repot those hydrangeas next spring," he'd say, or "I saw a beautiful old map at the antique store today. I think it would look perfect over your writing desk." Each small comment was a thread, weaving their lives more closely together, creating a tapestry of shared intentions. She found herself sketching designs for a small, shared library space, imagining shelves filled with their combined collection of books, a cozy armchair by a window where they could read side by side. He, in turn, began leaving her little notes with ideas for day trips, to explore hidden coves along the coast or ancient ruins tucked away in the countryside. They weren't just falling in love, they were building a life together, piece by careful piece, with the same gentle care and reverence they applied to the stories they cherished. One late autumn afternoon, with the air crisp and the leaves a riot of gold and crimson, they walked hand in hand through a local arboretum. The silence between them was not empty, but full, imbued with years of shared understanding and unspoken affection. He stopped beneath a magnificent old maple, its branches reaching towards the sky like ancient arms. He turned to her, his eyes warm and full of tender regard. "You once told me your story was meant to be a quiet one," he began, his voice soft. "And perhaps it is. But I've learned that quiet stories can be the most profound, the most resonant. And I believe our story, the one we're building together, is one of the most beautiful I've ever had the privilege to witness." He squeezed her hand gently. "I wouldn't trade a single one of our wonderfully complicated twists and turns for anything." A wave of emotion washed over her, a deep, abiding gratitude. She leaned her head against his shoulder, inhaling the comforting scent of him, wood smoke, old books, and something uniquely his. "Me neither," she whispered, her voice thick with feeling. "Not a single one." The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of rose and lavender. They stood there for a long moment, simply existing in the quiet beauty of the autumn evening, their hearts beating in a gentle, harmonious rhythm. The path ahead was still unfolding, full of unknown delights and discoveries, but she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that with him by her side, every step would be a story worth telling. And she couldn't wait to see what wonderful complications the next chapter would bring. The last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, leaving a lingering warmth on their faces. Elara turned her head, her gaze meeting Leo's. In the soft twilight, his eyes held a depth that made her heart flutter. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing the line of her jaw, a silent question in his touch. She leaned into it, a sigh escaping her lips. "That was perfect," she whispered, "not just about the sunset, but about the whole evening, about Ohim." "It was," Leo agreed, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. He didn't rush, didn't press. He simply held her gaze, allowing the moment to stretch, to settle into the quiet understanding that had begun to bloom between them. The air grew cooler, but a different kind of warmth enveloped them, a nascent affection that promised to chase away any chill. They walked back to his car, the gravel crunching softly under their feet, their shoulders occasionally brushing. Neither felt the need to fill the silence with chatter. It was a comfortable, companionable quiet, filled with unspoken thoughts and burgeoning feelings. When they reached his car, he opened the door for her, his hand resting briefly on the small of her back. The touch was light, yet sent a shiver of awareness through Elara. "Dinner?" he asked once they were both settled inside, the engine a soft hum. "I know a place that does excellent homemade pasta, if you're up for it." Elara smiled. "I'd love that." The restaurant was cozy, dimly lit, with the gentle clinking of cutlery and murmured conversations providing a soothing backdrop. Over bowls of rich, flavorful pasta, they talked, truly talked, about their day, their work, their passions. Elara, a landscape artist, found herself sharing details about her latest commission, a sprawling garden scene, with an ease she rarely felt with others. Leo, a custom furniture maker, described the challenge of crafting a unique desk from reclaimed oak, his hands gesturing expressively as he spoke of grain and joinery. They discovered a shared reverence for creation, for bringing beauty into the world, whether through brushstrokes or chisel marks. As the evening drew to a close, Leo drove her home. The streetlights cast long shadows, and the world outside felt hushed, as if holding its breath. When he pulled up to her curb, a comfortable silence descended again. Elara turned to him, her heart a gentle drum against her ribs. "Thank you, Leo," she said softly. "Tonight was wonderful." He smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. "The pleasure was all mine, Elara." He hesitated, then leaned in, his gaze dropping to her lips. It was a slow, deliberate movement, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Elara didn't. Instead, she leaned in slightly too, her breath catching. His lips were soft, warm, a gentle press that conveyed tenderness and a hint of promise. It wasn't a demanding kiss, but a question, a whisper of a beginning. When he pulled back, a faint flush colored her cheeks. "Good night, Elara," he murmured, his voice a little huskier than before. "Good night, Leo," she replied, her voice barely a breath. She floated out of the car, feeling a lightness in her step as she walked up her path. As she unlocked her door, she glanced back. Leo was still there, watching her, a quiet sentinel in the night. She waved and he waved back, then drove off, leaving her with a feeling of warmth that spread through her entire being. The path ahead was indeed unfolding, and Elara felt a thrill of anticipation for the wonderful complications yet to come. The days that followed wove themselves into a beautiful tapestry of shared moments. Their dates became more frequent, each one a delightful exploration of not just the town, but of each other's worlds. They visited art galleries, where Elara pointed out brushwork techniques, and Leo offered insightful observations on composition. They wandered through antique shops, where Leo's discerning eye could spot the hidden craftsmanship in a forgotten piece, while Alara imagined the stories behind each object. They cooked together in her cozy kitchen, the scent of herbs and spices filling the air, their laughter mingling with the clatter of pots and pans. Leo, surprisingly adept with a knife, chopped vegetables with precision, while Alara, more intuitive in her cooking, experimented with flavors. Alara found herself drawing more, inspired by the way light fell on Leo's hands as he worked, or the strong, kind line of his jaw when he was lost in thought. He, in turn, began sketching designs for a new easel, something sturdy and elegant, built to last, just for her. Their connection wasn't just romantic. It was a creative synergy, a mutual appreciation that elevated their individual crafts. Yet, amidst the growing warmth, Alara felt a familiar flicker of apprehension. She'd been hurt before, not dramatically, but enough to build a quiet wall around her heart. Previous relationships had often rushed in, demanding too much too soon, or fading away with a whimper, leaving her feeling unseen. Leo was different. He was patient, observant, never pushing, always inviting. But the intensity of her feelings for him, the sheer rightness of it all, made her nervous. It felt too good, too easy. Was she misreading something? Was this just a beautiful, fleeting autumn romance? One crisp Saturday morning, as they sat in a bustling coffee shop, sharing a pastry and the morning paper, Alara found herself staring at her half-empty cup, a knot tightening in her stomach. "Everything all right?" Leo's voice was soft, perceptive. He had noticed her quietness, her slight withdrawal. Alara hesitated, then decided to be honest as she could be without sounding dramatic. "It's just, this feels wonderful, Leo. Almost too wonderful." She looked up, meeting his gaze. "I'm not used to things feeling this effortless. It makes me wonder if I'm missing something, or if it's just a bubble that's bound to burst." Leo listened patiently, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then, he reached across the table, taking her hand in his. His thumb gently stroked her knuckles. "Alara," he began, his voice calm and steady, "I understand why you might feel that way. Life often teaches us to brace for impact, doesn't it?" He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But what if, sometimes, it really is just good? What if two people can simply connect, genuinely, without hidden agendas or inevitable complications beyond the normal bumps of life?" He squeezed her hand. "I'm not saying it will always be easy. No relationship is. We're two independent people with our own lives, our own quirks, our own baggage. But what I'm saying is that what we have, this feeling, this connection, it feels incredibly real to me. And I'm willing to navigate any complications that come our way, as long as I get to do it with you." His words were a balm to her anxious heart. They weren't grand declarations, but simple, honest truths delivered with a quiet sincerity that resonated deep within her. The knot in her stomach began to loosen. She looked into his eyes and saw not just affection, but a deep, unwavering honesty. "Thank you, Leo," she whispered, her voice a little thick with emotion. "I needed to hear that." He smiled, a reassuring warmth in his gaze. "Anytime, Alara. Always." That conversation marked a subtle shift. Alara began to let her guard down a little more, trusting not just in Leo's words, but in his consistent actions. Their relationship deepened, moving beyond the initial enchantment into the comfortable, sustaining rhythm of everyday life. They started meeting each other's friends. Alara's closest friend, Clara, a vibrant graphic designer with a quick wit, instantly approved of Leo. "He's got that quiet strength, Alara," Clara observed after a lively dinner party at Alara's apartment. "And he looks at you like you're the most fascinating person in the room. Don't mess this up." Leo's friends, a jovial group of fellow craftspeople and outdoors enthusiasts, welcomed Alara with open arms, appreciating her artistic eye and thoughtful contributions to their discussions. It was comforting to see how easily their separate worlds began to intertwine, creating new patterns and connections. As autumn gave way to the crisp embrace of early winter, their dates shifted. They took long walks bundled in scarves and hats, the cold air invigorating, their hands often linked inside a shared pocket. They spent evenings by her fireplace, reading aloud to each other from their favorite books, the crackle of the fire and the low murmur of their voices creating a cocoon of intimacy. Alara found herself sharing childhood memories, funny anecdotes, and even some of her quiet fears about her art career, the pressure to create, the self-doubt that sometimes crept in. Leo listened intently, offering not facile solutions, but genuine empathy and quiet encouragement. He told her about his own journey, the years spent honing his craft, the satisfaction of working with wood, and the occasional frustration when a piece didn't quite turn out as envisioned. He spoke of his family, a close-knit group who lived a few towns over, with warmth and affection, painting vivid pictures of boisterous holiday gatherings and quiet Sunday lunches. Ilara felt a deep sense of privilege, being allowed into these tender corners of his life. One evening, a small, almost imperceptible complication arose. Ilara had been working intensely on a particularly challenging landscape commission, spending long hours in her studio, lost in the world of color and canvas. Leo, understanding her need for focused time, had given her space, but a quiet evening together they had planned kept getting postponed. When they finally did connect, a subtle tension hung in the air. "I feel like I haven't really seen you in days, Ilara," Leo admitted gently as they sat on her sofa, a half-eaten takeout container between them. "I miss you." Ilara's shoulders slumped. "I know, Leo. I'm so sorry. This commission is it's consuming me. I get lost in it, and then I feel guilty for neglecting everything else." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "I'm not very good at balancing things when I'm in the thick of a project." Leo reached for her hand, his touch grounding. "I understand. I get like that with my work too. But it's not about neglecting, Ilara. It's just about finding our rhythm, isn't it? How do we make sure we still nourish Jish when our individual passions demand so much?" It was a question, not an accusation, and it hit Ilara with the force of a revelation. He wasn't demanding she change or give up her art. He was simply inviting her to co-create a solution, to build a relationship that honored both their shared life and their individual callings. "Maybe," Ilara mused, leaning her head on his shoulder, "we need to schedule us time even when things are crazy, non-negotiable moments, even if it's just half an hour to sit together or a quick phone call in the middle of the day." "I like that idea," Leo said, his arm coming around her, pulling her closer. A little anchor in the storm. That evening they talked late into the night, not just about their current projects, but about their expectations for a partnership. They discovered a shared philosophy, that love wasn't about merging into one, but about two strong individuals walking side by side, supporting each other's growth, and finding joy in the spaces where their paths converged. This conversation, born from a tiny moment of friction, actually deepened their bond, giving them a blueprint for navigating the complexities of a shared life. It was one of those wonderful complications that ultimately made their connection stronger, more resilient. As the days shortened and the first dusting of snow painted the world in white, Ilara found herself marveling at the quiet strength of their relationship. The initial rush of infatuation had matured into a deep, abiding affection, a sense of profound belonging. She no longer felt the old anxieties creeping in. Leo's steady presence, his unwavering belief in her, had slowly eroded the walls she had built around her heart. One particularly cold afternoon, Ilara was struggling with a challenging section of her current painting. The light wasn't right, the colors felt flat, and frustration was beginning to simmer. She was about to give up for the day when she heard a knock on her studio door. It was Leo, carrying a thermos of hot cocoa and a small bag of her favorite gingerbread cookies. "Thought you might need a break," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "And perhaps some fortification." Ilara felt a wave of relief, followed by a surge of warmth. "You're a lifesaver, Leo. I was about 2 seconds away from throwing my brush across the room." He chuckled softly. "Artist's temperament, I understand." He set down the treats and came to stand beside her, looking at the canvas. He didn't offer advice or criticism, just observed. "It's beautiful, Ilara, even unfinished." She sighed. "It's just not quite either way yet. I'm trying to capture the feeling of the light filtering through the winter trees, but it keeps eluding me." Leo gently took the brush from her hand, dipped it in a clean pot of water, and began to carefully clean it. "Sometimes," he said, his voice thoughtful, "when I'm working on a piece of wood and I hit a snag, I find it helps to step away, to look at it from a different angle, or to let my hands do something else for a while. Then when I come back, the solution often presents itself." He handed her a steaming mug of cocoa. "Maybe your eyes just need a different view for a bit." His quiet wisdom, his intuitive understanding, always seemed to hit just the right note. They sat together, sipping cocoa, talking about nothing in particular, just enjoying the shared silence and the comforting presence of each other. When Leo eventually left, Alara felt lighter, her frustration having dissipated. She didn't touch the canvas again that day, but the next morning, refreshed and with a clearer mind, the solution to her artistic dilemma seemed to magically appear. It was a small moment, yet it crystallized for Alara the depth of their connection. Leo wasn't just a partner, he was her calm harbor, her quiet inspiration. Winter deepened, bringing with it the magic of the holidays. They celebrated Christmas together, a cozy, intimate affair at Leo's small but charming cottage. He had decorated with simple rustic charm, pine boughs, homemade ornaments, and the warm glow of fairy lights. Alara felt completely at home, helping him bake cookies, wrapping gifts by the crackling fire, and sharing stories of Christmases past. She met his parents and siblings over a warm video call, feeling instantly welcomed into the boisterous, loving fold he had described. His mother, a kind-eyed woman with a gentle smile, told Alara how happy she sounded, and how much Leo talked about her. Alara felt a blush creep up her neck, a sweet confirmation of his feelings. New Year's Eve found them standing by the frosted window of Alara's studio, watching snowflakes drift down, illuminated by the streetlights. As the clock struck midnight, marking the transition into a new year, Leo turned to her. His eyes, usually so steady, held a spark of something profound. "Alara," he began, his voice low, "this past year, meeting you, getting to know you, it's been the most unexpected, wonderful gift." He reached out, cupping her face in his hands, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. "I don't believe in grand pronouncements or rushing things, as you know, but I want you to know with absolute certainty that I see a future with you. A beautiful, complicated, deeply fulfilling future." Alara's heart swelled, tears pricking at her eyes. The quiet sincerity of his words, the depth of his gaze, spoke volumes. "I see it too, Leo," she whispered, leaning into his touch. "And I want that future more than anything." Their kiss was slow, tender, a silent promise exchanged under the falling snow, sealing their hopes for the new year. As winter began to loosen its grip, giving way to the first hints of spring, their conversations naturally turned towards the future, a future that increasingly felt like a shared one. They talked about their dreams, both individual and collective. Alara dreamt of a larger studio, perhaps with a small gallery space. Leo envisioned expanding his workshop, perhaps even teaching his craft to apprentices. And increasingly, these dreams began to feature each other. "What if," Alara mused one afternoon, as they walked through a park where crocuses were pushing through the thawing earth, "we found a place with enough space for both? A home that could house both a studio and a workshop?" Leo's eyes lit up. "That's a wonderful thought, Alara. Imagine creating side by side." The smell of paint and sawdust mingled. The idea took root, growing organically, becoming a tangible possibility. They spent weekends browsing real estate listings, not seriously yet, but indulging in the fantasy, pointing out features, imagining their lives unfolding within those walls. It was a joyful, collaborative process, reinforcing how well their aspirations aligned. The last of the wonderful complications had been subtle, almost an internal one. It was the fear of losing the individual identity they had cultivated, the fear of merging so completely that they might lose themselves. But through these conversations, through the careful way they nurtured both their shared life and their personal passions, they discovered that a partnership didn't diminish them, it amplified them. Leo made Alara a bolder artist, more confident in her vision. Alara encouraged Leo to explore new designs, pushing the boundaries of his traditional craft. They were two strong rivers flowing alongside each other, sometimes merging, sometimes diverging, but always enriching the landscape. One late spring evening, as the air was soft with the scent of blooming lilacs, Leo suggested a walk to a familiar spot. It was the hilltop where they had watched that first breathtaking autumn sunset, the place where their story had truly begun to unfold. The setting sun was painting the sky once more, but this time in softer, warmer hues, tinged with the vibrant greens of spring. The world felt reborn, full of promise. They stood in their usual spot, looking out over the valley, the town lights beginning to twinkle below. The air was filled with the gentle hum of twilight, birds singing their final songs of the day. Leo turned to Alara, his hands gently finding hers, his touch warm and reassuring. He looked into her eyes, and Alara saw not just love, but a deep, unwavering certainty. "Alara," he began, his voice a little softer than usual, but clear and steady. "Do you remember that first evening we were here? You said you couldn't wait to see what wonderful complications the next chapter would bring." He paused, a gentle smile playing on his lips. "And they have, haven't they? Small ones, beautiful ones, ones that have only made our story richer, deeper." Alara's heart was thrumming, a sweet anticipation building within her. She knew, instinctively, what was coming. "From the moment I saw you," Leo continued, his gaze never leaving hers, "there was something about you, a quiet grace, a vibrant spirit that drew me in. And every day since, getting to know you, seeing the world through your eyes, sharing our passions, navigating the small bumps, and celebrating the big joys, it's shown me what true partnership feels like." He squeezed her hands, then slowly, deliberately, knelt before her, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. The ring inside shimmered in the fading light, a delicate silver band set with a single luminous moonstone, echoing the quiet magic of their earliest evenings. "Alara, my love, my inspiration, my home," he said, his voice imbued with profound emotion. "Will you make every chapter of our story a shared one? Will you marry me?" Tears welled in Alara's eyes, blurring the beautiful landscape, blurring Leo's earnest face. But her vision, internal and external, had never been clearer. This was it. This was the love she had dreamed of, the connection that felt like coming home. "Yes, Leo," she choked out, her voice thick with happy tears. "1,000 times, yes." He rose, a joyous smile breaking across his face, and pulled her into a tender, heartfelt embrace. He held her close, her face pressed against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart against hers. The scent of him, wood smoke and fresh air, filled her senses, a comforting anchor. When he pulled back slightly, he gently slid the moonstone ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, a cool, smooth weight, a tangible symbol of their promise. They stood there for a long moment, arms wrapped around each other, watching the last vestiges of sunset disappear. The sky was now a deep, inky blue, dotted with the first hesitant stars. A sense of profound peace settled over Alara. The path ahead was no longer unknown. It was a path they would build together, hand in hand, heart to heart. The news was met with delighted cheers from Clara and warm congratulations from their friends and families. There was no rush, no pressure for a grand wedding. What mattered was the commitment, the quiet understanding they shared. They envisioned a small, intimate ceremony, surrounded by their closest loved ones, perhaps in Alara's parents' garden, or on that very hilltop, under a sky as vast and full of promise as their love. They continued to nurture their individual crafts, their shared home now a bustling hub of creative energy, the rhythmic tap of Leo's hammer from his workshop blending with the soft swish of Alara's brush in her studio. Their days were filled with purposeful work, punctuated by shared meals, long walks, and quiet evenings curled up on the sofa, reading or simply existing in each other's peaceful presence. The wonderful complications had truly been wonderful. They weren't external dramas, but the subtle layers of understanding, the gentle challenges that had deepened their empathy and strengthened their bond. They had learned to communicate, to support, to give space, and to come back together, always stronger than before. One evening, a few months after their engagement, Alara found herself sketching Leo as he worked in his workshop, the golden light of the setting sun filtering through the window, illuminating the sawdust dancing in the air. His brow was furrowed in concentration, his hands deftly shaping a piece of cherry wood into a graceful curve. She looked down at her sketchpad, then back at him, a soft smile playing on her lips. This was her inspiration, her muse, her partner in every sense of the word. Later, as they sat on their porch swing, watching the fireflies blink in the twilight, Leo noticed her looking at her ring, turning the smooth moonstone over and over. "Happy?" he asked, his voice a soft murmur. Alara leaned her head on his shoulder, his arm coming around her, pulling her close. "More than I ever thought possible," she whispered. "It's funny, I used to think happily ever after was a destination. But it's not, is it? It's the journey. It's the everyday moments, the quiet understandings, the shared laughter, the comforting silences. It's choosing each other, over and over again." Leo kissed the top of her head. It is. And with you, Alara, every step of that journey feels like coming home. The night deepened around them, a soft blanket of stars beginning to emerge. The air was sweet, with the scent of night-blooming jasmine, and the only sounds were the gentle chirping of crickets and the steady, harmonious beat of their two hearts, perfectly in sync. The path ahead stretched into a beautiful, unending horizon, full of the quiet joy of a love that had found its truest form. And Alara knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that with Leo by her side, every single step would indeed be a story worth telling, a story of enduring love, built on kindness, understanding, and the most wonderfully simple complications of all. In the most wonderfully simple complications of all. And it would be a story that would last a lifetime, filled with countless more peaceful, happy endings, woven into the fabric of their shared days.